Well, hello and welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. We are continuing with our journey on all things holiday food. I'm bringing in a few friends that I know that I trust to talk about one of my favorite subjects outside of wine, which is what we eat, which hopefully you're doing a little bit of in addition to drinking the delicious things that we send you if you're part of the wine club. So with that in mind, I couldn't do a mini series like this and not include not only one of my favorite foods, but also one of my favorite people. I think someone who really opened my eyes to what food and good purveyors of food can be. When I first moved to California and I started working at Press, I, full disclosure, wasn't eating a lot of beef at the time. And I know, so crazy. Some of you, your jaws are on the floor right now. Pick them back up. The situation has been rectified. But I sat at the bar and I started eating the food at Press, and they put beef in front of me, and I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not really eating a lot of beef right now. And I took a bite and my eyes just went completely wide because I had never tasted beef like this. And I will tell you, prior to this weird little stint in my life where I didn't eat beef, I ate a lot of beef. I was a beef girl. I was a protein queen. I was in it for the long haul. I don't know what happened. I just kind of stopped eating it. And from that point on, I was like, wait a minute, this beef doesn't taste like other beefs that I had. What is happening here? The moral of the story is it turns out if you eat really good beef and the beef is coming from someone that you know, someone that you trust, and someone who's doing incredible things like the people at Flannery Beef, your mind can be changed. You can come back from a beef hiatus, which is what I did. And I've never looked back. In fact, the person that we've got on here today from Flannery Beef, she's been a friend. She's been a great person who's educated me on the subject. And I thought, you know what? I feel like all of you need a little education on beef like I did, because it will change your mind. It will change your life. If you are a beef eater, and if you're not, you might want to hop on that bandwagon, because these guys are a bit of a, if you know, you know, although I guess less so now than they used to be. They're quite famous now.
No.
When I first met them, I think Press was like one of the only clients that they had, but now they're quite famous and world renowned for doing something really special in the beef world. So we're going to be talking with none other than Katie Flannery, third generation.
That's right.
Flannery Beef in California. Hello, Katie. How are you?
Good. It's always good to chat with you. And it's funny you mentioned Press, because that was the first restaurant we were ever selling to. And I think it's been long enough now, I don't feel bad saying we were selling to Press before it was legal for us to sell to Press. So
wait, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
In order to sell for resale, so not just to somebody who walks in and buys a steak and takes it home, to sell to a restaurant who's then going to cook it and resell it, you have to be under federal inspection, not state county inspection. So, Dad had some setup with less where plausible deniability, but no, looking backwards, we definitely weren't allowed to do that.
Was that the connection? Is that how Flannery Beef came to be at Press? Was it through Leslie?
Through, actually, honest to God, you know who it was through? Robert Parker, which is hilarious.
Of course it was.
Yep.
Of course it was through Robert. Of course it was.
Dad,
all right, let's dive in.
Dad loves this story. We, and this is, probably like 18 years ago, much smaller than we were now, just had this little tiny retail storefront, and we were slowly building out like a website, e-commerce, way before e-commerce in the food realm was like popular. People were still a little bit hesitant to, ship meat across the country. But somehow our product got in the hands of Robert Parker, and he started posting about it on the wine forums, the Hedonist Gazette, all that kind of stuff. And I guess he was doing a charity dinner at Press, and part of his deal with Les Rudd was, I'll do this, but you have to serve Flannery Beef. And for Les, who was running, one of the top steakhouses in Napa Valley, for somebody to tell him, we're not going to use your beef, you have to use somebody else. Like, he was kind of, so Dad jokes, he just got this phone call one day out of the blue, and he says, hi, this is Brian. And he said, well, who are you? And it was Reuben Katz. It was Les's partner. He was just grilling Dad, who are you and why does Robert Parker want us to cook your steaks in press? And the dinner went great, and then press put us on the menu, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. That's crazy. I did not know that Robert Parker was the entry point. I just when I got there, Trevor Conk was the chef, and he spoke so highly of it. And Spencer Weiss, who was the GM at the time, he also was like, you know what, I think we all need to like take a field trip. And we would have so many meetings about Flannery Beef and making sure that people knew what it was and what you guys were doing and why it was different, because it was different. It did taste different. And I think for some people, they like kind of raised an eyebrow, especially when you told them, which we'll get into, that it was Holstein
Yeah.
cattle, which was not the norm, especially for a steakhouse. So, that was the first time that I really took a little divergent path into the land of beef. And, I give all credit to both you and your dad, because you guys welcomed us into your facility. You showed us around, you showed us what you're doing. It was full transparency. Any questions that we had, you answered. And it was such a great way to learn about a topic that I didn't know that I was going to be interested in. And I just love that so much. And it's what I love about wine, but I love your passion and energy and enthusiasm. And now, I mean, you've been doing this now for how long?
I think it has been 18 years, which is crazy to say out loud. I mean, that's insane. That's like
And
way
that's
too long.
just you, because
yeah.
just you. I mean, Flannery Beef has been around since when?
The official like transition to Flannery Beef, I think, was only in like 2011, and now no 2008. We needed to become federally inspected in order to continue selling to press and take on new customers.
Yeah.
So when we were a little retail store, we were called Brian's Fine Foods because it was like a Whole Foods, right? Like a really high end market deli. We were doing the beef, but we had fish, we had cheese, we had pasta, prepared goods, all that stuff. So then when we decided to kind of move 100% into beef, being, as creative as we are with names, we said Flannery Beef sounds really good. So
it does sound good.
I mean, there's no, confusion.
Yeah, no, I probably should have done like a listener discretion at the top of this episode, which is if you're not fed at present and you're feeling like you might be hungry in the next hour, you may want to just like hit pause in this episode and circle back. Go get yourself a snack.
Right.
Because we're gonna be talking about very delicious things, including beef and some other things. We'll also be drinking a little wine in this episode,
Perfect.
which we normally do. This is a normal adventure for us. So if you are part of the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast wine club, the wine that you should have in your hand today if you're drinking with us looks like this if you're watching. It's got a little flower on the front label. And on the back, it's going to say Arno Roberts 2023 Syrah from Sonoma Coast in Sonoma County. These are only 26 barrels of this wine produced. I would venture to call this, one of the darlings of California, a producer that is beloved by critics, beloved by sommeliers. It's got, great cult following. And when we got the opportunity to include it in the wine club, I was like, it was a no questions asked, like say less, absolutely. How much can we get? Like, what wine can we get? So I'm just thrilled to have this. And of course, if you're talking about sommeliers, there's one of two grapes that are probably part of the conversation, one of which is Riesling and the second is going to be Syrah. And so, Syrah, Arno Roberts, Sonoma County, I think this is a great entry point to the grape if you're sort of unfamiliar with it as is. But if you love Syrah, this is definitely a producer that you should know about. So we'll dive in a little bit into what the wine tastes like. But I really want to start the conversation on beef because, like I said, back when I was in my press days, beef was such an important part of the conversation. And in a lot of ways, it steered me into the idea between food and wine pairing. And I really think it's important as you guys are potentially navigating the holidays and what's up ahead for you to kind of understand what's on the table, not only from how it's tasting, but also from what you're choosing in the store. Now, I will mention that you can order Flannery Beef online. You can get all of the delicious things that we're going to be talking about. And in fact, this is something that my family regularly does. We always have Flannery Beef somewhere in someone's freezer. There is Flannery Beef somewhere. And we always have it at the holidays. So, and we live on the East Coast, so it is possible. But I kind of first want to start with what you guys are doing differently, Katie, and sort of how you built your business. Because I hinted at this Holstein thing, and I think it's so interesting because when people think of steak, they don't think of Holstein
Mhm.
dairy cattle, they think of Angus. So can we start there?
Yeah, it's all tied to kind of like the family legacy, if you will, because we're not ranchers. We're not raising cattle ourselves, and that's because my
Mm-hmm.
grandfather, his first job in San Francisco in, I want to say like the 1930s, was sweeping the floors of a butcher shop. And he
Mm,
eventually rose the ranks where he was running the entire show. And then opened up his own butcher shop in San Francisco, which is actually still run by my uncle to this day in Pacific
mm,
Heights, which is kind of fun. But so we've always been in that kind of landscape, if you will. We are considered a
mm-hmm.
further processor. We are buying from slaughterhouses, and then we're trying to do something to make it better so that when we sell it to our customers, we can say this is going to be the best in show. And for the longest time, my grandfather, my father when he was younger, my uncles to this day sourced Angus because that's what was believed to be, one of the top quality animals available in the United States. And it was about 20 years ago or so that just by chance, dad received a case of Holstein. And he jokes, he's very upfront. Had he known it was Holstein when he received it, he would have rejected it just on the
Yeah.
basis we do not
Yeah.
use this breed. That's because what's interesting, if anybody has like traveled outside of the United States, in Europe, almost all of the beef is coming from Holstein cattle because Holstein are considered a dual purpose breed.
Mm,
In the United States, we have so much land that the two industries can kind of like be siloed. The dairy industry operates completely outside of the beef industry. And so the beef industry, their mindset is, I want Angus, that's the breed. The dairy industry says, I need Holstein, that's the breed. I think nowadays it's something like 85% of dairy produced in the United States is coming from Holstein. So we have
mm,
a ton of Holstein. And if the beef industry doesn't want the Holstein because, okay, here's the other crazy part. And it's kind of funny. Like maybe 10 years ago or so, I would pitch to restaurants, to chefs, this is Holstein. And a lot of people would just kind of shut the door in my face and say, nope, I'm not interested in using old dairy females. I kind of had to
right.
say, like, that's great, but like, you do know that males exist too, right? Like, just
Yeah.
because you say the word Holstein and people just think, oh, female, female, female. There's two sides to the
Right.
coin. And so, in a weird way, the male Holsteins are a byproduct of the dairy industry because the females need to keep calving in order to keep producing
Right.
milk. But if you're, a dairy farm and you get a male calf, there's no use for it. So,
Right.
for the longest time, Holsteins were kind of like shoved over into the beef industry, but it was like this dirty little secret where, people sold it, but don't ever say it's Holstein. Don't say that word out
Mm,
loud. And so I think we were probably one of the first on this coast on the West Coast, to really kind of loud and proud say, this is Holstein beef. Let me educate on why it's different and why we should take a chance on it before just going with this like historical, no, that's not what we use.
right. So your dad gets this case of Holstein accidentally, and what does he notice about it?
He said, he opens it up and there were, four pieces in a case, and he said three were gorgeous. The fourth was like a holy moly. The marbling. The marbling pattern on Holstein will be, and so marbling is when you're talking about beef, the small specks of fat within the muscle itself. So it's
Hmm.
intramuscular fat. That's what we mean when we say marbling. And so the marbling pattern on Holstein will tend to be smaller and more diffuse than you will sometimes see in an Angus. Everybody can probably think of Wagyu, right? We've all seen
Hmm.
pictures of Wagyu. Wagyu is another breed, and it's characterized by heavy marbling. So think of the big streaks of fat running through that steak.
Right.
Holstein has tiny, tiny, tiny little pinpricks. And so it's a
Right.
very different marbling pattern.
So you notice the marbling, right? And obviously this looks different than I assume you were getting Angus previously. And so when you look at that, are you immediately like, all right, is this something that is a regularity? Is it a fluke? Is it something that I should be digging into? I mean, what next step, and do you cook it up? I mean, what next steps do you take from there?
The next thing that Dad did was to call the supplier and say, I want to bring in more of this product to identify just that. Was this a fluke? Right? Could this have just been one case of fantastic product? What we see in the beef industry a lot is that within a grade, you will have swings of quality. You can try to kind of like mitigate those swings if you know what plants to buy from. And so that's kind of like where we fall in this role. Like we are very specific about where we bring product in because we, like an example, a couple years ago, we brought in some product from a plant in Pasco, Washington, and it was USDA prime. And, we bring a couple cases in. It was horrible quality, but it was marked USDA prime. But you pick a piece from that and you put it to our normal product that we're used to bringing in. And I mean, it didn't even look choice. It was that bad. And so you can kind of navigate by knowing where you're getting from. If they have like a high quality baseline, that'll kind of weed out a lot of those lesser quality ones. So the first thing he wanted to do was make sure, okay, can I get more from this plant? And it wasn't for a couple months that he realized it was Holstein. And he jokes, he should have known because the marbling looked different. The Holsteins also have a smaller eye or diameter to the muscles. So visually there are things that, like for me right now, I could pick out most of the time, not all the time, but I could pick out what's Holstein, what's Angus by looking at it. But back then, he didn't think to, is this a different breed? He just fell in love with it. And then there was no going back.
And then I assume okay, so if I go to the grocery store today, I go to like a Whole Foods, I assume most of what I'm seeing in grocery stores is still Angus, right? Like you guys are sort of the outliers in supplying beef that's Holstein, right?
Yes and no. It's Angus. It might be Hereford. It could be Holstein. A lot of your supermarket aren't really going to call out the breed. They might, if they're pulling from any local ranchers, they might call out the ranch, and then you could go online and look up that ranch and see, what type of breed they're running. The thing with Angus, though, is Angus is both a breed and a program. Like, have you heard of certified Angus beef?
Yes.
Okay, so certified Angus beef basically means that, if you want to call your product that, you have to like hit these check boxes, right? Okay. But you could be raising Angus and bring Angus to market that's not certified Angus beef. It's Angus.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, we see that in wine, right? Like you can have a wine coming from Barolo and it can be from the Nebbiolo grape, but if it's not made according to all of the certifications of the DOCG, then you cannot call it Barolo.
Yeah.
There's our wine tie-in for the episode.
Well, and it's funny, whenever we're talking Wagyu, I'll usually throw in like a similarity to Champagne or, that Appellation Controle. Wagyu is a breed of animal. And so you can have good genetics where it's a high quality genetics, or you could take that breed and crossbreed it with an Angus and get, lower quality genetics, but they're still all going to be called Wagyu. Kobe is a prefecture in Japan. So if a Wagyu animal comes from Kobe, they can call it Kobe beef. But if a Wagyu animal comes from America, you can't call it Kobe beef. So that's where like so American Wagyu has kind of that term. I hope more people know about it because I don't know if you've seen it. I think that a lot of people are confusing Wagyu with a quality level.
Yes.
And it's not a quality, it's a breed.
It's a breed. It's a type of cow. It can be raised anywhere. Like I could have it in my backyard today and I could sell that as Wagyu, but it wouldn't necessarily be the Wagyu that we would think of when we think of, true Japanese Kobe.
What happened is, I think it was in the 70s, Japan sent several bulls to the United States, and then Japan declared the Wagyu breed a national treasure. So they don't export the genetics anymore. So if you have Wagyu within the United States, in order to keep your herd healthy, you're constantly crossbreeding, and then you'll have to bring the genetics back up. And so it's almost like more scientific than any average consumer wants to go into. But if you're buying Wagyu, you should know what percentage of the animal is Wagyu and what's the other percentage. Is it 50% Wagyu, 50% Angus? Is it 75-25? You know, all of these. And there's levels, there's names, there's words for all of this stuff out there. So you can find it, but a lot of producers aren't going into that level of detail. And I think you've got some bad actors there, because if you have a low quality Wagyu, they can put it out with the word Wagyu on it. And if the consumer thinks it's high quality, they'll get, a higher dollar for it.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a great distinction. And again, I think going back to one of those things that was sort of a light bulb moment when I toured and talked with you guys, like there were so many little things that you think that you know about something that's such a regular occurrence in your life, right? Like so many of us are going to the store and buying beef, or we're going to restaurants and we're ordering beef, we're eating beef on such a regular basis, and you hear these words over and over and you think you know what they mean, but then all of a sudden somebody actually turns out reality is a surprising amount of detail. I want to circle back a little bit because one of the things that you mentioned was the grading of like choice versus prime. And I think that was a big aha moment for me too, when you guys were like, oh, this is like a human that goes through a facility and just with their eyeballs looks at it and goes, that to me was such an important life lesson, where it's like, oh, there's a lot of human, and by extension, human error associated with these grading processes. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think it would be great to sort of illuminate what this process looks like, because a lot of us are going into the store going, oh, we don't eat choice, but we only want to eat prime beef. So what does that grading process look like?
Oh, it's funny. Since you were here taking a tour at Press, technology has caught up with us. So, in the past, what happens, and here's an interesting note, you are not required to grade your animals. So if you've got a herd and you bring them to the slaughterhouse, if you want to get a USDA grade, and that's prime, choice, select, you actually have to pay the government to come in and perform that. And so if you've ever heard people throw out like what percentage of beef is prime, there's two numbers, around 2%. Or around 10%. It's around 10% of graded animals will be graded prime. If you look at all animals, it's around 2%. So that can kind of be tricky, because you hear both and you're like, well, how can they both be right? Because you're looking at different data sets. But what happens at the slaughterhouse, if you decide to have your animals graded, is they make an incision on the carcass between the rib and the loin, kind of like lower back area, and it will display this eye of the meat, right? This little like window into the soul. And the grader would simply walk down the line and from that single slice, make a determination of the quality of the entire animal. And to your point, when it was a human doing this, there's always going to be like human factors, right? Like it could be their first day on the job, right? They could be hungover. They could have just had a bad breakup. Sometimes things miss the mark. What a lot of the big plants have transitioned to now is computer systems. And so that same eye of meat, a computer takes a picture and it will actually spit out this algorithm of what percentage is marbling, what's the exterior fat, and they kind of grade it. And so now the graders like sit at a computer and it's like Tinder. They like swipe left, swipe right, like prime choice. But that said, you still see variances, because again, this is just one little piece that we're looking at and making a decision on the entire carcass. Like we have run into that where you start cutting at one end of the primal, that's like the whole muscle group. Okay. So I'm cutting steaks, beautiful, beautiful. And then they just start getting worse and worse and worse. And by the other end, it's just like, that's going in the grinder.
So when that happens, does it always go to the grinder, or are there other places that you might find it? Like, is that how you might find like a discounted cut of beef?
It depends on who's producing it, because so we kind of do like our own internal grade where we say if we don't think this is deserving of USDA prime, we'll pull it back. A lot of other places won't, because in their mindset. I don't agree with it, but they're like, well, the government said this is prime. I paid prime for it, so I'm going to sell it as prime. So, you can see that happen. And I don't think I blame those people. I guess if you're just like, if you are looking at pennies, that makes sense. I just don't agree with it.
Yeah. No, but you guys have sort of an additional secondary not grading, but inspection, right? When the meat comes in, like you do an additional peek at things and say, yeah, this is up to quality or it's not.
And that kind of came about as a result of our dry aging program. So it also is something that's just like really unique to
Great segue.
us. I know, right? Perfect. The dry aging aspect means that because when beef leaves the slaughterhouse nowadays, every single primal, subprimal, right, big muscle group is cryovac, vacuum sealed. For us to dry age, we have to remove it from the cryovac. So every single piece of meat in our dry aging program, we are basically looking at, as we open it. And we take that time to identify, okay, this piece looks weak. We're going to segregate it and maybe move it somewhere else. Whereas if you weren't doing that step and you're just kind of rolling through product, things could slip by easier.
And so dry aging is what?
There are two types of aging. There's wet aging and there's dry aging. Wet aging is, honestly, if we could change this, we should call them aerobic aging and anaerobic aging, because that's the difference, the presence of oxygen. In a vacuum sealed bag, you pretty much have like hit the pause button on any flavor development, right? It's suspended animation. Nothing is really going to happen. When you're dry aging, by introducing oxygen, you're basically allowing a couple other chemical things to happen that will increase the depth of flavor. And so like the two main things that happen during dry aging come from moisture loss and microbial growth. So moisture loss, you take the primal and we just put it on a rack in a cooler. Okay. So you control the temperature and you're allowing airflow, 360 degrees all the way around the primal. That lets moisture from within the muscle evaporate. Easiest kind of like way to understand what's happening when you take a stock and turn it into a demi, right? As the moisture evaporates from that pot of liquid, it gets more and more concentrated, right?
Right.
Same thing happens with beef. The more moisture that you pull out of the muscle, the more concentrated, the more beefy the flavor gets. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is going to be very dependent on who is dry aging and where you're dry aging, is microbial growth, which is just a fancy way of saying mold. Is there mold present on the product? Different species of mold will have different flavor profiles. And you have a lot of people that believe there should be no mold growth, which is absolutely fine. From my perspective, that means you're only relying on that dehydration aspect. So you're kind of only, pushing one lever forward to get flavor development. Whereas for us, we are very pro mold, like super mold. If you follow our Instagram, like I get a lot of mold on the product and I get a lot of pissed off people commenting on how much mold we get, but it's phenomenal for flavor. It really, really is.
And are you controlling the type of mold? Is it something that's naturally occurring? Is it like fermentation where you introduce a specific type of yeast strain and that creates a different flavor profile?
Yeah, and it's kind of like the sourdough starter concept where, and sometimes people get confused with that with beef. It's not that the mold is present on the beef when it comes to us, right? So you could buy a primal from the exact same supplier I am and put it in a dry aging room. You're not going to get my product. The mold is in our coolers, and so we're introducing it to the meat when we open it, kind of at the beginning of that process. I've gotten geeky enough that about 2 years ago, I just went into this like scientific deep dive. I got all of the mold genetically sequenced so that we know the exact species that we're working with. And it's actually really interesting. It's a lot of people will think, you've heard blue cheese as a flavor, like kind of descriptor for dried, right? There is a certain type of mold, Penicillium roqueforti, that really likes to grow on beef. And it also is what's used in blue cheese. So I was thinking, okay, maybe we got something like that. I don't know. totally different species. And it's funny, I was reading this research paper and it was like 1931, way before like science was like this in depth. And it was describing this mold and it was, kind of fuzzy, purplish, like whiskers. I was like, that's totally mine. And it was called Flamnidium. I was like, that is the coolest freaking name I've ever heard, right? If I can tell people that
cool.
my mold is Flamnidium. So I send it out. I'm like, please God, Flamnidium. And the test results come back. It's called Mucor, which sucks.
Oh, less sexy.
I know. So I gotta like come up with a different name or something. But whatever. I'm doing my diligence. Like, where else is this particular strain found? Yada yada yada. It turns out there is a French cheese called Tom de Savoie. I don't know if you've ever had it.
Oh, love Tom de Savoie.
Guess what type of mold is used in the production of Tom de Savoie?
Tell me it's Mucor.
Mucor. How cool is that?
Amazing. We love that. That's so cool.
Yeah. And so that's why and it was cool. It was like kind of like a light bulb moment for me because I've always, had our product and wondered, why does everybody say blue cheese when they eat dried beef? Like mine doesn't taste like blue cheese. It's kind of nutty. It's got some of that funk, but it's not blue cheese. I have a totally different mold. And it's very much like that Tom de Savoie, kind of like a warmer, I think it's a more palatable flavor profile.
It's that perfect cheese for someone that wants to dabble in the funk, but isn't quite ready to leave the world of something less pungent like a brie. Like they're not quite, they grew up on maybe Velveeta and some, more American cheeses. And they're like, well, brie sounds interesting, but I'm not quite ready to go to Roquefort. Like Tom de Savoie, great. It's the Chateau Neuf de Pop of cheese. It's a great little bridge into from the new world to the old world. It's a perfect cheese. And I think it's a perfect description of your beef because it does, to me, the Flannery beef, and I know you guys at Press were doing like somewhere on like an 18-day dry age. It was like the perfect amount of funk where like it's there, it's present, but it's not the only thing that you're getting. Like you're still, I think one of the commentaries on dry age is like, well, I don't want my beef to taste like cheese. I want it to taste like beef. And so you guys kind of nailed that 18-day perfection. Is that still kind of the range you guys are in, or was that specific for Press?
We do that specifically for wholesale. And so on our website, our baseline is about 30 days because for most retail consumers who are familiar with dry aged beef, they're looking for that. That's kind of the sweet spot. We do the 14-18 day for our restaurant clients who are kind of in that position where they want to put something on the menu, but they don't know if the diner has ever had dry aged beef before. And if you put down something super strong or even like, midway strong, there's that almost like hesitation. And so when I talk to chefs, I pitch it. I'm like, this is the Goldilocks of dry aged. It's just the right amount.
Yeah. No, people loved it. There was always going to be someone that had questions about the Holstein, questions about the dry age. And, you kind of guide them through, but it's the nature of working at a steakhouse. But the other thing about a steakhouse is you've got to guide people through the different cuts of beef. We've kind of talked about beef in general, but obviously different cuts are going to give you different things. Obviously, some of the more familiar ones, New York strip, ribeye, filet. Can you kind of break down what some of the more popular cuts are going to give you and maybe what people should be seeking out based on different preferences?
Yeah. So what you just mentioned there, those are considered middle meats in the industry. So they're coming from basically the middle of the animal, and it's going to be the rib and the loin, right? So kind of like from your neck down to your rump, if you will. That's a very small kind of percentage of the animal, but that's where the top quality pieces are. Starting at the neck, kind of halfway down, that's the rib. All right. And so you can get bone-in ribeye steaks, or you could get boneless ribeye steaks. That's where your 7 rib roast will come from. Okay. So a whole 7 rib.
Big fan of Christmas.
I know. And then, okay, here's a quick note though. When we say prime rib, that doesn't mean it's USDA prime. You can have a USDA prime rib or a USDA choice prime rib. So be careful on that. I swear the meat industry does that just to screw people up. It's not fair.
Yeah, they're very similar to wine. They like to confuse people like that.
Yeah, so prime rib doesn't by nature mean that it's prime grade. So you do want to keep an eye out for that. But then the rib moves into the loin. And so that's where you would get your New York. You can get porterhouses, T-bones, and bone-in New Yorks, and your fillets from there. So that's really the realm that we live in here, because those are your kind of like your top movers.
And what do you think is the best for someone who loves like I personally I'm a ribeye girl. I like a hefty amount of marbleization, but I know that's not necessarily the case for everyone. What do you think is the best?
I think you have to balance what you want in terms of fat content and in tenderness. All right. So if you're just saying I want the most tender thing in the entire world, that is what I have to have, you have to go with the fillet. That's the most tender muscle there is. The fillet doesn't have that much fat to it. It doesn't have that much flavor to it. If we're being very honest, a fillet is kind of boring, but it will give you that tenderness. If you flip it on the other side and you say, okay, I want pure flavor. That is the number one thing I'm looking for. You hit the nail on the head. You want to go with the ribeye. The ribeye is going to have a lot more flavor. It will have more internal fat. So that's not to say it will have more marbling, the intramuscular fat. The ribeye actually has kind of a seam of fat that runs right through the middle. And so that's what I mean by internal fat. Like if you can think of, you've had a slice of prime rib and there's that little kind of like nugget of fat right in the middle. That is present in the ribeye. So if you don't like that, do a fillet, or if we're talking roast, I'll segue just straight into roast now. The New York is an interesting cut because all of the fat on that primal and the steaks runs along one side. So we do something called a club roast. It's like from my grandparents' time. The rib roast is like what everybody thinks of as holiday dinner right now, right? Back then it was actually a club roast. People ate New York roasts for their holiday dinner. Yeah, it's kind of like a blast of the past. But the club roast is really nice if you kind of want to split the difference between the ribeye and the fillet, because it has more flavor, but all of the fat is on the exterior of the roast itself. So after you cook it, it'll really like benefit from that fat being present. But then when you slice, when it's on your plate, you can just cut the fat off. Because I'm assuming somebody in the house wants fat, right?
I mean, only the sociopaths.
Yeah.
I proudly consider myself one of them. So do you order it as a club roast? Like if you're going to a butcher, is that what it's still called, or is there another name?
Yeah, I don't know. There might be another name. It's a boneless New York roast. That's, we call it a club roast just because that's what my grandfather called it, decades ago.
Makes me a grasshopper and like take me back to the 50s. I'm here for it. That sounds awesome.
It's my favorite. Actually, it's what I really like, because if we're doing steaks, I want a ribeye. Okay. I personally am not a fan of like a full traditional rib roast because I think it's hard to get that kind of like internal fat fully cooked. And I don't like undercooked fat. It's just kind of greasy. The texture is like not there for me. When you do it as a steak, you can get it cooked and you get that hard sear on one side. So I'm, I don't know if I can say it out loud around dad, but I don't like rib roasts.
Well, that's a good question. So what happens at the holiday table at your house? What do you guys
Well,
eat?
the butchers always eat what doesn't sell. So it's
so you chicken because everything sells.
No, it's just whatever roasts we have kind of like left over, they'll usually make it home. So it's usually there will always be a club roast, some size of rib roast. Dad doesn't really like tenderloin, so it's and then depending on the people, but it's usually we do both a club roast and a rib roast. So you kind of get the best of both worlds.
I'm with Dad. I'm not a tenderloin person. I've never understood like the soft meat thing. But that's a person, this is like wine. It's like, it's just a personal thing.
There's a time and a place for it, I think. I do like tenderloins. If you're doing a Wellington, you want a tenderloin, right?
That's true.
If you are going to be slaving in the kitchen for like this crazy sauce, the tenderloin would work really well with that because it's kind of like a blank palette, right? You can do whatever you want. Good point. But yeah, no, if it's just like a steak by itself, boring.
Yeah, I'm not here for it. Or if I am, to your point, there better be a really good sauce or like a really good wine, which by the way, I have completely ignored the entire of the show. if you're drinking with us, to me, Syrah is like, it's like a steak and wine dinner in a glass. Like it gives you all the meatiness of a steak. There's like, it's like charcuterie and olive and pepper and all of these like really savory things that we think of when we think of meat. But then there's all of this delicious kind of purpley, juicy fruit in here. And because it's coming from California, that purpley fruit is a little more amplified than it would be if you got it from like a cooler climate in like, the Northern Rhone or, some of these like cooler climate places in France that, they make these kind of very black cracked pepper kind of vibes. This has, to me, because it's being made in the new world and it has old world tendencies to it, is sort of the best of both worlds. So I would say first and foremost, like if you're drinking with us, stick your nose in the glass because aromatically, this is one of the most interesting grapes out there. Red grapes don't normally give you this level of aromatic. Normally, it's fruit and maybe a few flowers, but Syrah gives you so much. And I think that's in a lot of ways why Soms really love Syrah. And it's why Riesling is often in the same conversation because aromatically it's just so interesting. You can keep going back to it without having to take a sip. Then you take a sip and you notice that, it has all this rich fruit. It has all of these like savory things, but it has this like, to me, it's like very perfect tannin. And it's not soft tannin like a Pinot. It's not aggressive tannins like a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's usually just kind of like somewhere in between. Obviously, we want tannin for beef. It has to be part of the conversation when you're talking about food and wine pairing 101. The protein of your beef and your tannin, they kind of come together. They do a little dance. They spin each other around and then they're gone. They're off the dance floor. They've exited and gone somewhere that I don't want to know about. And that's kind of how that pairing works. And when we start, bringing salt into the conversation, that's where fruit's really lovely. And this is why red wines work really well. But I think if you're talking about some of my favorite food and wine pairings, you have to talk about Syrah and beef. Everybody loves to talk about Cabernet, but Syrah and beef is just one of my favorites. How do you feel about Syrah?
No, first I gotta ask you because I don't want to fuck this up. I got two wine glasses. Which one am I supposed to use?
Which one is comfier for you?
This one.
Then use that one.
I just didn't want to be like lowbrow.
All right. So no, there's no. You know what?
Oh, God.
I have to tell you, in my older age, I've changed my outlook on a few things in life, and wine glasses are one of them. I think they're incredibly important. I love my stems. This is a Gabrielle glass. It's a universal wine glass. Katie held up both a stemless and a wine glass that has a stem. Not that stemless isn't a wine glass. And she said, which one? I said, whichever one is comfy. And I believe that because I think there is this tactile thing that happens with your hands before it hits your mouth that if it's unpleasant in your hand, you're not going to want to drink it. Wine isn't just the juice that exists in the glass. It's everything that's around it. It's the way that, the glass hits your mouth. And if it feels like a stem is too cumbersome, if it feels like that's the wrong choice for whatever environment or mood you're in, then it's the wrong choice. It doesn't matter what the wine is. The right choice is the right glass for you at the time. And that's what I mean about changing my mind, because I think back in the day, I was like, no, it has to have a stem. And there's, I'll give you all the reasons why a stem is great. And, this style of wine glass is great. But I also know the reality of the situation. You've got 3 kids. You're in the middle of your day right now, drinking a glass of Syrah on a podcast. Like, it's a week before Thanksgiving, your busiest time.
Well, in that case, I should be like double fisting.
Exactly. And I think that is sort of the name of the game at the holidays. It's like, however it can get into your system and make you feel happy, I support that decision for you. But going back to Syrah, do you drink Syrah? Is this a grape?
I don't drink Syrah. I am in a Pinot phase of my life right now.
I love this for you. Okay.
I do. And I'm actually kind of digging this right now. So
they say that Pinot and Syrah are very close cousins. People liken Syrah more to Cabernet, but the genetics of it all is actually it's closer to Pinot,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense because I think structurally it resembles Pinot a bit more. And then aromatically, like I said, you don't normally get aromatics like this with Cabernet. You do get more interesting aromatics with something like Pinot Noir. So I get it. And Arno Roberts is just one of these great producers that's on every major wine list across the country. Somms love them, critics love them. I love them, and I like them because I think there's a purity of fruit here that doesn't feel empty. Sometimes winemakers are like, "Oh, I'm a minimalist winemaker," and you're like, "All right, but it doesn't really taste like anything." But these guys, I feel like they strike a balance of minimal intervention, really letting the grapes shine, and then also just doing a little something to make it a little bit. It's like the salt and pepper of it all, which is a great question. I mean, seasoning wise, are you pro like a steak rub? Are you pro sauces, salt, pepper? Like, what's your game plan here?
Again, it's going to depend on the cut, right? So
Okay.
if it's a cut that doesn't have a lot of inherent flavor, it's going to be a tenderloin, you need to do something. If it's something like a
Okay.
ribeye, you can go simple with salt and pepper. And then ask yourself about the dry aging, right? Because not everybody is doing a dry aged rib roast for Christmas. If it's dry aged, then I am adamantly in the camp of you really don't have to do anything because that's bringing so much more flavor to the table that you could do some crazy like butter crusted whatever, but it'd be a lot of work for a little bit of gain potentially because again baseline it's already going to be head and shoulders above what you might be used to with an unaged cut, but not like in our house. And especially if your dad, it's only salt and pepper. You can't do anything else. God forbid you do like an herb rub. If it's green, he's not into it. He doesn't like vegetables.
Do you do the I mean, I've always heard you got to kind of pat it dry, right? Get as much of that external moisture off of it so you can get the Maillard effect, right? Did I make that right?
Yeah.
And then salt. But I've heard a few different like schools of thought. So the salt thing, I've salted like the night before and left it in the fridge. I've salted it just before. I've salted it out. Like, where do you think salt needs to hit the steak? Like, if it's like a ribeye in New York, something like that.
For salt, I don't know that it would depend on the cut as much as it would on the age. If it is dry aged, you do not need to salt it in advance. If it's not dry aged, I would salt it probably the night before because the purpose of the salt is to draw moisture out from the muscle itself. So we've already taken care of that for you with the dry aging process, right? Your first point about making sure that the exterior is dry for that Maillard reaction, you do want that. So regardless of what you do before you throw it in the oven or on the grill, pat it dry. But for that concept of like how long in advance to salt, again, if it's not dry aged the day before, if it is, you really don't have to.
I think I know the answer to this question, but every now and then, I'm not going to name names, but every now and then I see family members douse their steaks in olive oil before they grill them. How do we feel about that?
Why? I feel like it's a waste of olive oil.
This is my question. I mean, like if we're having like a ribeye, right? And you can clearly see there's going to be a lot of fats being rendered out of this thing. Like what are we doing here?
You don't need to do that. I mean, but to your point about the wine glasses, like you can cook your steak however you want, right? I don't have to agree with it. It's funny. I will name names. My husband, humbles me every day because I married him and I throw him under the bus all the time. I feel so bad. I love you, Nick. He hates dry aged beef. He just and any steak I bring home, the ketchup comes out, the barbecue sauce comes out. I just like, but again,
stop it. He does not break out the red sauces.
Yeah, I'm working on the kids, right? That's like my line in the sand. Like, I'm not going to say anything about you, but we are not raising the children to eat meat like that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, I guess like I will never yuck someone's yum if ketchup and barbecue sauce are your thing.
Oh, it kills me. It absolutely kills me.
The decision for you.
It's so bad.
But I will die on that hill. It will never hit my table. I'm also just like I'm not a ketchup barbecue sauce fan in general. Like it has to be really, really extenuating circumstances for either of those things to be
barbecue sauce belongs with barbecue, not with steaks.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for everything.
I agree. Katie, I know we're getting down to our last few minutes and I just want to make mention again that all of the delicious steaks that are where all the work has been done for you, where the easiest thing that you can do for the holidays is just buy a really good cut of beef and not fuck it up. That's all you have to do.
It is,
just buy it.
I will shamelessly plug our product on that. It is nice when you take the plunge and buy something of such a high quality. It's like buying an insurance policy, right? It's hard to mess up. So if you've got, this big dinner, splurge, because then you can rest easy.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I think like listen, I love my recipes out there. I love, trying to do all the fun things. It's to me like the holiday dinners it's just about getting through it and trying to make something like a little bit delicious, right?
Yeah.
Seriously. And like the easiest thing you can do is just like buy really good quality product and you guys make the best. I mean, I would not have had you on here if I didn't truly believe that still. Oh my God, how long have we known each other now?
Way too
I was
long.
at Press in 2015.
Yeah.
So here we are a decade later. I genuinely believe that you guys are just, no pun intended, a cut above the rest. And I continue buying from you, even here in Pennsylvania, where we, not that we don't have great purveyors of beef out here, but it is different. And I will also, we didn't talk about the Jorge, and I think that I need to at least drop it into the conversation and I'll shout out my friend Luke from California.
It's got a fun story to it. We can keep talking.
It's got
for
a fun
5 minutes.
story. Yeah. The Jorge, you can tell the Jorge story, but I will say that so I'm part of this fantasy football league and my friend Luke is the commissioner and we have a side bet for when we play each other. And the winner gets a Jorge. And I have yet to receive a Jorge. I've always sent the Jorge. And every freaking time I do it, I'm like, I want my own.
You gotta win.
So you have to plug the Jorge because the Jorge, when the Jorge is on the line, there is nothing better. So what is the Jorge?
It's funny. For all intents and purposes, it's a bone-in rib steak. But the backstory on the Jorge, and this goes way back to, our roots when we were a tiny, tiny little company with a butcher shop. And, this guy would call up and he ordered now and then one day he calls Dad and he says, okay, I need, I want to tell you about a steak that I want you to cut. And this is exactly how I want it done. I want it the full bone. I only want it from the chuck end of the rib, yada, yada, yada. And Dad's kind of listening and thinking, fuck, like this just sounds like a lot of work. And then Jorge goes, and I need 100 of them. It's like, oh, okay, because back then that was like massive for us.
That's a huge order.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So it turns out that Jorge would throw parties for his distributors. And so what he wanted was a cut of beef to, cook and serve at this party. And it was the main thing about it is it's full bone from the chuck end of the rib. So we were kind of talking, rib from your neck about halfway down. This is only from the side that's on the neck of the animal. There's a particular muscle called the spinalis dorsi that is got the thickest part of it is kind of at the neck of the animal, and then it tapers down as it moves away. So by only cutting from the chuck end, we're guaranteeing a good portion of that spinalis dorsi. You might have heard it called like a rib cap. It's God's gift to man, basically. It's the most flavorful, tender cut on the entire animal. And so that's what a Jorge steak is. And, we shipped them a couple times. He had these parties and we had this tiny little website. I remember the website only had, 9 items on it. And Dad calls up.
I remember the old website.
So old. Oh my God. I mean, it worked, but like, holy shit. And Dad calls up.
You always called after to make sure the
Very true. Very true. But, Dad calls Jorge and he's like, hey, Jorge, I really like this cut. I want to put it on the website and I want to name it after you. I want to call it the Jorge rib steak. And Jorge goes, let me talk to my lawyers. Dad's like, I just want to name a steak after you. Like, I don't want to be in your will. Like, what is this? But, sure as shit, a week later, Dad gets a call from Jorge's lawyers and we're allowed to call it the Jorge rib steak. And then it kind of took off, again, we were really small, so we didn't think, whatever, we'll just name a steak this. But I have been to restaurants in Los Angeles that on the menu, it says Jorge rib steak, which is just so fun.
Can you say why Jorge needed to call his lawyers? because of which Jorge it was.
Jorge Ordonez.
There you
Jorge
go.
Ordonez, yeah. One of the largest importers of Spanish wines, and we have a great relationship with him and his children, who are kind of running the show here in the United States. Super, super nice people. I think dad and mom went over to visit Jorge in Spain, and they said that like they ate way too much food in the course of a week. But
yeah,
and it's a great cut. It really kind of, how I was talking, the ribeye has more kind of that internal fat. It will have more fat with it, but to your earlier points, like about the tannins and the wines, you kind of pair it where you can cut that fat, and it can really, really be an amazing experience.
yeah, especially in we talked about Syrah for this episode, but certainly Spanish wines when we're talking about Tempranillo, when we're talking about Garnacha, Mencia even. I mean, if you also are you a Mencia girl?
No,
If you love Pinot, you should be dabbling in Mencia.
I should. Okay, I'll have to remember that. Text me after so I don't forget that.
I will. Yeah. And for anyone else out there, I mean, I think that's, people often skip over Spain, I think myself included to some degree, because the grape varieties aren't always as familiar as some of the other ones that we've become more familiar with from like Italy and from France. But Spanish wine and steak are just, they're delicious. And I will say that Jorge Ordonez is one of the great importers of Spanish wine. So, kind of to bring this all full circle, if you're out there in the world looking to see, is this a good wine? The hack that we have talked about ad nauseum on this podcast is you turn that wine around and you look for the import in the back of the label. And if it says Jorge Ordonez on it, not only do you know that the man has great taste in beef, he's also got great taste in wine, and whatever is going to be in your glass is probably going to be fantastic juice. So that's my spiel for the day. I love that we got to weave in Jorge into the.
I mean, a good amount, yeah. Between Jorge and Robert Parker, I feel like we have more in common with the wine world than we knew.
We really do. I honestly, I remember you and I had a conversation a few years ago. I think you were going to like a dinner in Vegas or something, and we were talking about dry aging beef and sort of the parallels and the similarities between aging wine and aging beef. And there's a lot of similarities between what you do and what the wine world does, and many different paths to arrive at very different yet delicious results. And I think it's always fascinating to dive into someone else's world like yours to see what some of those variables are, because I think once you understand how many can exist in a particular subject, the world just becomes so much more interesting and so much more delightful. And obviously we're all very busy during the holidays, but if you have 1 second to take for yourself to like be a little curious and do a little more digging and look on the Flannery Beef Instagram for fun mold related videos.
It's more information than anybody wants to know, but it's fun.
It's fun, right? It is fun. And I think the point of this podcast is to remind everyone that obviously what we drink is delicious and that's important, but also that it doesn't just exist in our glasses, as I've said many times before. It exists in so many different facets in our brains and in our hands and in our lives. And I think it's important to kind of stretch out and enjoy all of it, not just what we're drinking and eating. Katie, one last plug for Flannery Beef. Where can people find you and all their products?
Very simple, flannerybeef.com. The socials are at Flannery Beef. So again, we're creative with names. But yeah, follow us, shoot us an email if you have any questions. We love to talk about beef.
You're very good at it. And I will say the website is much better now.
I mean, there's always still glitches, but yeah. Well, Dad's favorite line: "We are better at beef than we are at technology."
And I think that's the only thing that really matters. All I want is the beef to arrive delicious, and it always does. Thank you so much. I know you are super, super busy, so I'm going to let you get back to it. You guys who are joining us that are not members of the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club, now is your cue to rectify that situation. You can do it before the holidays really get going. And you can do that by checking out the description below. You're going to get 4 wines in your shipment every other month, curated and selected by me and the Wine Access team. It's $120 plus tax, but including shipping, and you get 10% off all of your Wine Access purchases. Also, you can gift this wine club. So if you're thinking about whether or not you are maybe missing a gift for someone in your life, this is a great way to have a gift that maybe you can also partake in. That's a selfish
no-brainer, yeah.
It's a no-brainer. Yeah, so maybe gift the wine club and gift the beef. The beef comes in a lovely gift box.
We do, yeah. We do have great gift boxes.
I have gifted many a beef to friends and family across the years. Thank you guys so much. I hope your holidays going great. Katie,
happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
It was good to catch up with you.
Always. Likewise.
All right.
See you soon.
Talk later.
Cheers.
Bye.